voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
You may have seen posters, memes, even baby onesies emblazoned with the letter Q, the conspiracy theory's main symbol and signal. But what is QAnon?
YouTube, Q's plan to save the world. What's Q stand for?
In a time of deep political polarization and widespread distrust of institutions powered by disinformation, QAnon is the mother of all modern conspiracy theories.
The heart of the QAnon belief system is that almost everyone in power in the United States is part of a secret cabal, a deep state.
Donald Trump was picked by military leaders to run for president as a way to kind of bring down the deep state.
Which is affiliated with all sorts of misbehavior, not limited to child trafficking. Donald Trump, in the QAnon view, is going to save us from this in a moment called the storm. And the belief is that the storm is coming.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out. The storm is supposed to be a moment where all of these evildoers, Democrats, bureaucrats, all sorts of media figures are going to be arrested and put in front of military trials in Guantanamo, and America will be restored to its former greatness.
We are finally putting America first.
Since 2017, a person or group calling themselves Q has been posing as a government insider online, posting what followers see as clues about this imaginary war. Nearly all of these clues, including that Hillary Clinton was arrested and John Kennedy Jr. is alive, turn out to be wrong, but the batting average doesn't seem to matter.
You think he's still alive? Oh, absolutely.
In a short time, the conspiracy theory has spread, from fringe internet forum to mainstream MAGA memes and Facebook feeds, to the real world. Researchers note that QAnon's path into mainstream politics is really the story of an election, a pandemic, and the internet itself.
If you're at home and you're isolated and you're wondering what's going on with the pandemic and you're unsatisfied with state and national government explanations, then conspiracy theories start to look reasonable in the face of the absence of authority and of knowledge.
Meanwhile, President Trump has used his own social media accounts to promote QAnon followers and content nearly 200 times. The White House has called news coverage of QAnon and other conspiracy theories ridiculous, but we've seen how such conspiracy theories can prove dangerous.
He had the words MAGA forever and United We Stand scribbled on the palm of his hand.
Last year, the FBI identified QAnon as a potential domestic terror threat.
If you believe your government is being controlled by satanic sex traffickers, that's almost an invitation to take action on its own.
75 people who have shown support for QAnon have run for Congress this year. 19 of those candidates are on the ballot this November. Polls suggest a couple might actually win. Candidates like Lauren Boebert, a restaurant owner who defeated President Trump's endorsed candidate, a 5-term incumbent, in the Republican primary in Colorado's 3rd district. Boebert spoke favorably of the conspiracy theory in May and appeared on QAnon talk shows.
No, honestly, everything that I've heard of Q, I hope that this is real.
In July, Boebert distanced herself from her prior praise in a tweet calling QAnon fake news. Boebert is favored to win in November.
Hello.
Then there's Jo Ray Perkins, the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Oregon. The insurance agent calls herself a digital soldier, and in a now-deleted tweet said,
I stand with President Trump. I stand with Q and the team.
And though her chance in the general may be slim, she won the Republican primary by a landslide.
Have you guys been following 4chan, Q, any of that stuff? Anybody?
The Republican candidate running to represent Georgia's 14th district, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is one of QAnon's most ardent and unapologetic congressional candidates.
President Trump needs me in Congress to put America first.
Greene is a businesswoman and longtime conspiracy theorist who was condemned by her own party in June after several racist and anti-Semitic videos she had posted on Facebook were unearthed by Politico. Many of her posts have been removed, but her support for QAnon still lives online.
Now, Q is a patriot.
Greene won more than 40% of her primary vote and is set for a runoff in a deeply red district that's all but a sure lock for the Republican candidate. Greene and Colorado's Lauren Boebert didn't respond to our request for comment. Jo Ray Perkins, Oregon's Republican nominee, declined to comment on her support for QAnon, saying she was focused on the issues.
If one or two QAnon-friendly congresspeople wind up in Washington, I don't think that's going to change anything very much. And the worst thing that's likely to happen from that is that these people will be given a platform on which to share these ideas.
These candidates haven't said how their belief in the conspiracy theory might guide them as lawmakers.
I'm just an anon.
For now, they just want to win.
QAnon is a creature of the internet that desperately seeks legitimation in the physical world, and particularly in the real world of Washington, D.C. For QAnon believers, there would be very little to celebrate more than having someone come to the U.S. Senate who stated a belief in QAnon. There's no victory like that.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of August of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, of course, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world, and it does. Well, something breached the security perimeter there at the White House yesterday during that presser, and Trump had to go off behind the room. The Secret Service came out and said, something's happening out there. Now, from all indications, it was not an absentee ballot application that breached the perimeter. In fact, nothing actually breached the perimeter. There was some police activity a couple of blocks away, but it being D.C. and it being the White House, and now that they have that great big beautiful wall around the White House, I guess you're going to be under heightened security now, wouldn't you? Especially if you have to feed the fear of the fearful. I've never seen a much more cowardly, fearful bunch in my whole life. I take that back. They're about as fearful and cowardly as you would expect. Anyway, look, it's still the presidency. It was a bit too close. I fear, though, that, and I mentioned this on social media, of course, you might hear a lot of things mentioned here that was mentioned on social media because, you got to try it out a little bit. Anyway, we're going to say it out loud, and that is, it's going to be really effed up when they find out that the police activity was that the cops shot a 9-year-old black kid who was playing with a fake Star Wars photon blaster, and the cops will maintain they really thought it was a real Star Trek photon blaster. And what happens when the kid hulks up? What happens when he hulks up with that, what they thought was a real Star Trek photon blaster? It's going to be really embarrassing. But anyway, this is the world we live in. Up is down, down is up. The 1917 pandemic of 1918, or is it? No, it's the 1918 pandemic of 1917. Did you know that it stopped World War II in 1945? Yeah, and the only reason is because of the airports during the revolution. All those runways we had, damn, good thing too, huh? Well, apparently that's about as much of American history as Trump knows, and he knows more than the deplorables who voted for him. They follow the reasoning. You have a pandemic in 1917 that didn't start until 1918, and it ended in 1919. Well, actually, it didn't end, but, they call it the 1918-19 pandemic. If you want to be, clear. Racists call it the Spanish flu because it had, I'm serious, it had a racial connotation to it back in the day. And the only reason it was called the Spanish flu is because it had been floating around for quite a while until some intrepid scientists and medical types discovered it in Spain, though it had been brought to Spain from elsewhere. But it fed into, the racist BS of the day. Woodrow Wilson, you can't get much more racist than that unless you're Stonewall Jackson, who Trump just loves. It is kind of weird. He's got, portraits of Stonewall Jackson all over the place and a copy of Mein Kampf right next to his bed. It's the only book he reads. I don't know. Does he really read it, or is it read to him? I don't know. It might sound really nice in a Slovakian accent, wouldn't it? Well, so they hustled him away. Whoever it was that, was out there, Trump said he got shot. And he was so happy he got shot. Yeah, he's shot. Taken to the hospital. Yeah, okay, well, I think it could be a sad predicament for all around. And especially since, how many people are dead now in America? How many? Too many. And this guy is gaslighting like there is no tomorrow. And the Russian investigation that we're going to be touching upon a little bit today is turned around to investigate the investigators. And we're going to talk a little bit, just a tiny bit, about Belarus today also. Of course, Belarus could be a bellwether of what could happen here. You just never know. He is so pushing this thing that mail-in ballots is going to be the worst. And he gave away the farm, too, and he says, they do it, and we do it, too. Yeah, you're the only one who, when I say they, he, the only ones, the GOP, are the only ones who have ever pretty much stolen absentee mail-in ballots. And I think harvested them? Is that how, what is that? Harvested. Oh, man, they just hate representative democracy, and they're going to pull out all the stops to make sure, that gets taken away because the black guy had it. Anything the black guy did, we got to do the opposite. Well, why don't you just breathe straight carbon dioxide then and see what happens? They'll do it, too. If Trump says do it, they'll do it. Just don't call them a death cult. This is the other thing. Trump, on the record, said that kids going back to school will only represent a small fraction of the deaths. And you can't call them a death cult with that. Oh, yeah, send our kids back to school, just a small fraction of deaths. It's a small fraction of deaths until it's your kid. Everybody is, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but it seems everybody on their side seems to be impervious to the idea of protecting another kid until it happens to their kid. So selfish. It is just so selfish. Well, prosperity gospel, selfishness. GOP, I don't know. You put on the They Live sunglasses and you see that the GOP really is, we are selfish bastards and we're going to grab everything we can. You don't like it? Stop us. And even when we do stop them, we let them get away with it again. It's sort of like the bad parent who tries to lay down the law, and as soon as they lay down the law, then they're apologizing to the kid. Oh, I'm sorry, it was so mean. Come on. Stop making excuses. Stop explaining. Stick to the demand. Don't spank the kid. You don't need to. Just stick to your guns and don't let the kid get away with it again. Damn. No, we just gotta, we can work with you, and then they stab you in the back. How many times are we going to be Charlie Brown, and how many times do they get to be Lucy kicking us and kicking that damn football? Damn it. Well, those are a lot of boomer illusions. I'm sorry. But fortunately, there's a lot of boomers here listening to this show, fortunately. It is important and imperative that we pass these really obscure pop memes down because they could be lost to the ether. I mean, who's going to remember My Mother the Car references 20 years from now? I mean, no one remembers it now. Well, it's up to us to make them remember. And when I say make them, come on, make them. Well, all kidding aside, we have too many deaths from this virus. No one's talking about bounties anymore, and I think it's because Trump is expecting a vaccine from Russia. You know, I almost went with a story with Duterte in the Philippines, who is counting on that vaccine from Russia. Are you kidding me? These people want to terraform the earth. I'm not taking any medical cure from them. It's not going to be a cure. It's going to be a cookbook. Get that reference, too. It's a cookbook. Yeah, fatten us up. Get us all healthy, and then next thing you know, we're off-world with rings through our noses being led through, I don't know, to that processing plant in the sky. I'm not taking it. But Duterte is counting on a vaccine from Russia. And I really think that's what Trump is counting on. He needs it by October because, well, the election is in November. And when people start having babies that look like thalidomide babies, look that one up. That's going to be way past the election, even the inauguration. When that happens, he'll just blame it on the Democrats. Did you know that we are much more a threat to the United States than Vlad and Russia? Vlad and Russia running an actual, not just an influence campaign, but an attempt to flip votes. And you can flip votes in a hackable voting machine. It's really hard with absentee write-in ballots, mail-in ballots. A lot harder. Mostly because there's quite a few levels of security. But now we, the Democratic Party, is not the loyal opposition. We're the enemies of the state. And the hostile foreign power that's trying to terraform the United States of America into some Siberian steppes, I guess, is the partner in an enterprise. I truly believe Trump is counting on the October surprise. I think there's going to be a few October surprises. Trust me, because we still got Bill Barr involved in this. But a vaccine from Russia that he can, put his hat on. Look at this. And so he's got to be nice to Vlad. He has to ignore the bounties. But I actually think that Trump is expecting a bad vaccine from Russia that will kill millions. Because I'm pretty sure Trump has a bounty on the heads of his opponents and maybe even more. Just, who could be. Look, you might as well identify who your opponents are going to be 70 years into the future, sort of like how they charge the Postal Service for pensions for workers that haven't been born yet. 70 years into the future, you got to fund their pensions, but they're not even born yet. Yeah, well, so what? Do it, because we say so. And the USPS is doing that. And I suppose now they have the ability to determine who your political opponents are going to be. When I say political opponents, anybody that might vote against you, 70 years into the future, and they're going to take measures to take care of that problem. You know, sort of like a final solution. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? We don't follow QAnon conspiracy theories here. Nah, you know, how about Special K? I want to start a Special K conspiracy theory. You know, what is it? 15 essential minerals for your body? Yeah, that's a conspiracy theory right there, if you ask me. Spray on some minerals and then call it healthy. Thank you very much. Well, we gave you a rundown of the basket of deplorable QAnon-affiliated congressional candidates, and we had them right here. Keep track. We have one in my district. Oh, my God. Well, you get what you get, and you expose what you can, and there's still going to be a lot of people who don't care because they are part of that toxic third, the constant toxic third I always speak about, and boy, there seem to be a lot of them right here. On the rest of the menu, the D.C. Police Union begged a federal court to block the mandatory release of body cam footage and the names of the officers involved in shootings. Sure, well, you know, because, you know, people might think bad thoughts about a cop if they find out that he killed an innocent bystander while serving a warrant. Don't let people know about that. Russian toady Ron Johnson subpoenas the FBI for discovering that Trump colluded with Russia, and is right now. And New York's true nursing home death is cloaked in secrecy. But you know what? Cuomo still keeps touting their great numbers. Come on. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Thai Prime Minister is concerned about another pro-democracy student protest that issued new demands on the monarchy. Oops. And Belarusian opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanouskaya is safe in Lithuania after escaping certain reprisals for running against Alexander Lukashenko. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. But hey, you know, Netroots Nation is going to be happening virtually this year, and Kelly and Ricky are manning Radio Row, our spot in Radio Row in the virtual realm. And so the host line on our Skype account will be open. So call in. We'll give you more info as we get closer, which I believe is Wednesday. Coming up, that's tomorrow. True convention really does begin on Thursday. But there's a few workshops that happen on Wednesday. Nonetheless, stay tuned for that, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our Patreon link, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity has helped us fulfill our civic duty of resistance radio as the founders originally intended, so many years ago, and we've been doing continuous broadcasting, you know, the 24/7, 365 kind. I'll get it out. For almost 10 years now. Wow. And because we're dedicated to a cause, and that cause is to resist, as our constitutional duties require. We take it very seriously, and thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that and so much more. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted up on Twitter at Justice Putnam and a few other places too, like Cookbook West, because you can follow the show there at Cookbook West. And you can also pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it comes out of Reuters by the ubiquitous anonymous worker bees. The Washington, D.C. Police Union said it asked a court to block the mandatory release of body camera footage and names of police officers involved in shootings. The federal district passed a police reform law in July after weeks of protests in the nation's capital and across the globe against systemic racism and police brutality, sparked by the killing of African-American George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis. Well, it was more than just one. One had the knee on the guy's neck, the other were pretty much killing him too. But let's not split hairs at this point. Floyd's death, as well as other high-profile incidents of police brutality, led 36 states to introduce initiatives to change or study policing. Washington's emergency legislation requires the Metropolitan Police Department to release the names of officers and body camera footage within 5 days of an officer-involved shooting or the use of serious force, among other measures. Records of previous incidents dating back to the beginning of the body camera program in October of 2014 were to be released by August 15th. We're talking 6 years ago now, folks. The police union argued in its court filing made on August 7th that releasing those records could harm officers' reputations. It's 6 years after the fact, excuse me. The release of the body camera footage and names of officers will unjustly malign and permanently tarnish the reputation and good name of any officer that is later cleared of misconduct concerning the use of force. Excuse me. 6 years after the fact, I believe that actually the camera footage is for officers who went through the process of internal review. Nationwide, data on police discipline is limited. A Reuters investigation found that many police union contracts call for disciplinary records to be kept private or erased and make it difficult for citizens to file complaints. Experts have said body-worn cameras or bystander footage can increase the likelihood of attention to or discipline for police misconduct. And, of course, why would you want anybody to know that? On July 31st, Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser released footage related to killings and 3 officer-involved deaths. The mayor's office did not respond to a request for comment, and the DA office declined to comment. Arthur Spritzer, senior counsel for the ACLU in Washington, D.C., said the organization agreed with the union that there was a right to privacy, but said it did not apply to officer-involved shootings. He noted that some of the issues the union brought up with the law are already addressed with certain checks. We don't think the identity of a law enforcement officer who is engaged in official conduct is a matter of sensitive personal information at all, Spitzer said. The union's latest move comes on the heels of a separate lawsuit it filed, which argued that the portion of the reform law that stripped it of the right to negotiate with management over the discipline of members was unconstitutional. Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Republican Senator Ron Johnson said that he has subpoenaed the FBI to produce documents to his committee related to the Trump-Russia investigation. The Wisconsin senator also defended a separate investigation he is leading into Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and Ukraine, even as Democrats say the probe has the effect of amplifying Russian propaganda, and as U.S. intel officials say they have assessed that Russia is working to denigrate Biden ahead of the November election. But that's okay, because China and Iran say that they don't like Trump. So that means the Democrats have two cards on their hand that say they're bad people. And all we have is Vlad. And why would we worry about Vlad? I'll tell you why. Well, Johnson's Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee is one of multiple Republican-led Senate panels scrutinizing the FBI's investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. Another, the Judiciary Committee, has released a series of documents in recent weeks aimed at discrediting the probe, including material that Chairman Lindsey Graham said raised questions about whether the FBI had misled Congress about the accuracy of information it received during the investigation. Now, understand, well, it's not just our intel, but intel from our allies. And Trump says our allies are the enemy because they know he's a Russian plant. They all know. We all know. This is what they do in Vlad's mobbed-up Russia. This is what they do in the former Soviet bloc, like Belarus. The FBI said in a statement it had received the subpoena and that the Bureau had already been producing documents and information for Johnson's committee. Hey, how about telling them, screw you, we're not going to answer your subpoena. We're not going to show up for your committee hearing. Condon, Matt Sadensky, and Megan Hoyer bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Riverdale Nursing Home in the Bronx appears on paper to have escaped the worst of the coronavirus pandemic, with an official state count of just 4 deaths in its 146-bed facility. The truth, according to the home, is far worse. 21 dead, most transported to hospitals before they succumbed. It was a cascading effect, said Emil Voziev, an administrator at the hospital, one after the other. New York's coronavirus death toll in nursing homes, already among the highest in the nation, could actually be a significant undercount. Unlike every other state with major outbreaks, New York only counts residents who died on nursing home property, and not those who were transported to hospitals and died there, which actually is a tactic used by Republican counties in this state of Oregon. We don't have the huge actual numbers that New York has, but the way of counting them has been a vast undercount for infections and deaths. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, 3 refreshing things about Radioactive, starring Rosamund Pike, written by Jack Thorne, who adapted it from the graphic novel Radioactive, Marie and Pierre Curie, A Tale of Love and Fallout by Lauren Redness, and directed by the multi-artistic Marjane Satrapi. 1. It's great for once to see a marriage that works. I get it. Conflict is the core of storytelling, so if you're focusing on a relationship, you look for the cracks, you look for where it breaks, and those stories should be told. Oh, but just this once to see a marriage weather its many challenges with love and devotion and respect. 2. Satrapi's conceptualization of Curie and Rosamund Pike's performance. At one point, Marie Curie stands before a class and says, "I'd like to talk to you about radium, a most peculiar and remarkable element because it doesn't behave as it should." There's your core metaphor right there. Curie is the only woman to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different fields. In case you're wondering, she was the first of only 2 people to do so far, period. And you don't get that accomplishment, says Satrapi, by cooking pies and cookies, being gentle all day, or caring much about what other people think. You must focus on something greater. Thus, her Curie is blunt and suffers no fools. Though she can be unpleasant, Pike's artistry keeps Curie sympathetic. Marie Curie, before she was even an adult, lost almost everything she loved, so Pike shows us the person Curie built on the scars of her grief, constantly braced for the universe's next blow. And seeing that, you root for her. 3. This film is also about Curie's science. Redness, Thorne, and Satrapi not only take time to explain the Curie's discovery of radium, polonium, and radioactivity, but they also look at the effect of those discoveries during the Curie's lifetimes and beyond. And thus, Radioactive becomes a film of ideas, challenging us with the Curie's complicated legacy of their world-changing work. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Julia Rosen. In 2013, 2 mountaineers were nearing the top of Volcan Jujujaico, a 22,000-foot tall volcano on the border of Chile and Argentina, when they saw something unexpected. Just 2,000 feet below the summit, the climbers spotted a mouse scurrying across the snow.
And it's really a remarkable sighting because no one expected wild mammals to be living at an elevation of over 20,000 feet. At that elevation, it's the scarcity of oxygen that makes it really a challenging place to survive and function. But then also just the extreme cold. It's an extremely inhospitable environment.
Jay Stortz, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Nebraska. The climbers reached out to Stortz because he studies how animals adapt to high altitudes, and he was so intrigued that he decided to make his own trip to survey the area. Stortz and his colleagues spent a month at Jujujaico earlier this year, where they confirmed what the climbers saw. They found mice everywhere, including on the summit, officially setting a new record for the world's highest-dwelling mammal. Stortz says the summit sighting was fortuitous. His climbing partner, Mario Perez Mamani, saw the mouse dive under a rock just as Stortz made it to the top, exhausted and groggy from the thin air. It took Stortz a minute to gather his wits, but he eventually managed to catch the mouse with his hands. Stortz collected that mouse and others as museum specimens that will enable future scientific analysis. They also recorded their encounter on video. The report is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Now that he's home, Stortz wants to understand how these mice can survive in such harsh conditions, and conversely, what prevents other animals from venturing so high.
Clearly, the mice that are living at these extreme altitudes have physiological capacities that are very different from your typical rodent.
He and his colleagues are comparing the genomes of the mice from Jujujaico to their lowland relatives to see if they can identify the animals' high-altitude adaptations. He's curious whether they have evolved some of the same strategies as mice that live at high elevations in North America and the Himalaya. Stortz also wants to know how mice are finding food on top of a barren, rocky volcano, thousands of feet above the highest green plants. On his next trip, he plans to analyze the stomach contents of the animals they capture.
It's really an open question as to whether most species whether their elevational limit is set by physiological tolerance or just the lack of ecological opportunity. It's probably a combination of both.
Whatever the answer, Stortz suspects there may be more high-altitude animals out there than scientists thought. It's just a matter of climbing high enough to find them. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Julia Rosen.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Colorectal cancer is the number 2 cancer killer of men and women in the United States, but it is preventable. Early on, colorectal cancer typically has no symptoms. It starts with a precancerous polyp or abnormal growth in the colon, which can be removed without surgery. Several tests are available to find these polyps, so they can be removed before they turn into cancer. Screening also finds colorectal cancer early when treatment works best. Recommended screening for adults at average risk begins at age 50 and continues until age 75. Learn about screening test options and find out which tests are covered by insurance. Talk to your healthcare provider about when you should be screened and discuss the best tests for you. For more information about colorectal cancer prevention, please visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In this horrible time of economic collapse, it is truly touching to see so many corporate chieftains reaching out in solidarity with a hard-hit working class. We know they're doing this because they keep telling us they are. Practically every brand-name giant has been spending millions of dollars on PR campaigns in recent weeks, asserting that they're standing with us, declaring over and over, we're all in this together. Except, of course, they're really not standing anywhere near us. While we're waiting in endless lines at food banks and unemployment offices, the elites are still getting fat paychecks and platinum-level health care. The severity and gross disparity of our country's present economic collapse is not simply caused by a sudden viral outbreak, but by a decades-long plutocratic policy of intentionally maximizing profits for the rich and minimizing everyone else's well-being. As the eminent economist Joseph Stiglitz rightly put it, we built an economy with no shock absorbers. Jobs, once the measure of a family's economic security, have steadily been shriveled to low-wage, unreliable work, untethered to a fair share or any share of the new wealth that workers create. In a relentless push for exorbitant short-term profits, today's executives have abandoned any pretense that a corporation is a community of interdependent interests striving to advance the common good. Instead, while the honchos are richly covered, they're washing their hands of any responsibility for the health, retirement, and other essential needs of their workforce. Rely on food stamps and other publicly funded programs, they say, even as their lobbyists and for-sale lawmakers slash the public safety net. This is Jim Hightower saying these forces of American greed have shoved millions of working families to the economic precipice, and all it takes is a virus to push them over.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Should we fear Donald Trump's trumpeting the idea of postponing November's election? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In a July 31st tweet, Donald Trump, after declaring that the 2020 election would be extraordinarily inaccurate and fraudulent, floated the idea of postponing the election until people can, quote, securely and safely vote, end quote, presumably in person, after the danger from COVID-19 has passed, sometime in the indefinite future, presumably with him remaining in power. The proposal is preposterous and will gain no traction because a president has no constitutional or statutory power to postpone an election or to remain in power after his term ends. None. Zero. But there was a second part and purpose of the tweet, to lambaste voting by mail, which will be used by states more often in 2020. 5 states, prior to COVID-19, used voting by mail exclusively for their elections, including heavily and reliably Republican Utah. What's dangerous here is Trump's attempt to undermine the electoral process and our faith in it. Combine that effort along with his recent refusal to answer Fox News reporter Chris Wallace's question, would he accept the results of the election if he lost? That's scary. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day that federal troops pushed Kelly's Industrial Army out of Washington, D.C. and across the Potomac River. The Army was a group of unemployed men who had come to the nation's capital to protest government inaction. The country was in the grip of an economic depression. The nation's agricultural regions in the South and Great Plains were also hit by a drought. Times were hard for American workers and families. The call had gone out across the nation for the unemployed to make their way to the doorstep of Congress. The goal was to petition for public infrastructure projects to put people back to work. Businessman Jacob Coxey had organized a March of the Unemployed from Ohio. Charles T. Kelly and his group came from California. They rode the rails and made it to Des Moines, Iowa, where they encamped. After a while, the local residents decided the unemployed group had outstayed their welcome. The Iowans provided lumber so the Industrial Army could build flatboats and be on their way. By the time Charles Kelly and his men made it to D.C., Coxey had already been sentenced to 20 days in jail for trespassing on the Capitol lawn. Yet unemployed men from across the country kept coming into the nation's capital. 1,200 men arrived from different points across the country. One of those in Kelly's group was a young author by the name of Jack London. London wrote of his experience, quote, across the wild and woolly West, clear from California, General Kelly and his heroes captured trains. But they fell down when they crossed the Missouri and went up against the effete East. The marchers' protests earned no help from Congress. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit. A tad cooler today, expecting a high only around 92 or so. Plentiful sunshine, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Mostly clear tonight with lows in the mid-50s to lows in the upper 50s to low 60s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs only around the mid-80s, but we'll probably get about 90 here anyway. And winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County here in Southern Oregon now are at 473. Another spike with 2 confirmed deaths, but we already went through how those are undercounted. Grass pollen is rated low. The air quality index in the region is good at 29 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at 8. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.94 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 63%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 93 and sunny. Paris is 77 with a rain shower and a flood warning because of flash and heavy rains. Rome is 93 and sunny. Kyiv is 74 and fair. Kabul is 84 and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 86 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 55 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 57 and cloudy with a fog warning, which is normal this time of year. And New York is 85 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy with a heat warning because you're going to really warm up later in the day. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Thai Prime Minister said student protesters had gone too far after some issued a 10-point call for reform of the monarchy, which is considered sacred in the country's conservative culture. About 4,000 protesters chanted "Long live democracy" at Thammasat University on the outskirts of Bangkok. Speeches were delivered calling for the resignation of Prayuth, who first took power in a 2014 coup, and an end to military domination of politics. But protesters from the university's pro-democracy group also issued a 10-point call for monarchy reform, becoming at least the third student protest group to break a decades-long taboo on questioning its role and powers.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Belarusian opposition politician Svetlana Tikhanouskaya has traveled to Lithuania from Belarus amid the protests and is safe, the foreign minister Linas Linkevičius said in a Twitter post today. Tikhanouskaya emerged as Alexander Lukashenko's main rival at Sunday's presidential election. Her team had been unable to reach her by phone after she left the Election Commission building earlier. She told reporters she considers herself to have won the election, not Lukashenko. And the protests go on, and her life is still in danger. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And, of course, you know that Netroots Radio will broadcast on. And we'll meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.